All right, so this is CNIT 40. We're down to Chapter 4 here. And by the way, the CNIT job fair is running. You might want to, that might be more important for some of you to attend that than this class. And I am recording this, so you can view the video later if you want to take off. But anyway, for those of you that are here, and I see quite a few are here, we'll just go on to Chapter 4, which is here. All right, so monitoring and detecting security breaches. There's 4 kinds of data to monitor what's going on your machine, relevant to us. There's log data, which is probably the #1 most important thing, and then there's network flow data, packet data, and application level metadata. All right, let me turn on the projector, since I have somebody here physically. All right, logs are usually the most useful and most important and commonly used, but these others are useful for certain occasions. The logs record whatever you configure them to log. And for DNS servers, it typically records errors in queries and delegations that fail, queries for non-existent domains. This is typically the case. You typically don't record successful events. You record things that failed. That's usually the things that are most important to understand attacks or indeed to fix problems with your system. So bind has a logging set here. You can set it in various categories, what severity of thing, critical or warning or notice you want to put, and where to send the errors and so on. So the channel defines your output medium. You can put them in syslog, the standard syslog, or you can redirect it to a file or elsewhere. You can say the maximum number of files that are used. Linux systems typically log into a file until it reaches a certain size or time, and then it makes another file and zips the old one, and then after a while it throws away the old one. So you don't fill up your whole hard drive with log files. You can decide what severity to log and exactly what you print about each log. And you can decide to log queries, and this is something you might do if you really want to have a lot of information about what's going on with DNS. You could log queries, and then it'll show you someone tried to go to www.example.com and get the internet IP version 4 address here. It records exactly what the query was. So that'll tell you which hosts you're querying for which domains, and that would be pretty burdensome for your DNS server, but it's something you might do if you really want to track down who on your network is playing games at work or something. Or analyze an attack. And security records requests that were denied, rejected by access control lists that say you're asked to host for something it's not allowed to send, and those are set using these option statements in the configuration file. You could say which things are allowed on the server. And you can have update security. These are requests to attempt to update DNS data that were denied. So somebody's trying to send data to your server and it's denied, so that would most likely be an attack unless you're trying to send data to your own server and it's failing somehow. And there is a tool here that does generate dynamic updates. All right, and you can determine what updates are allowed. And DNSSEC, of course. If your server supports DNSSEC, then you can log information about the DNSSEC requests and responses. And if you do that, you'll see all this stuff, getting a DNS key and resuming some validate and so on. Just some information about DNS key is all I want to say there. You'll see there's some records about what you get. And then you can report zone transfers, transfer in and transfer out. Zone transfers are used to update a whole database because you're deploying a new server, and going out, they copy all the data off the server, which is something you don't normally want to allow a normal outsider to do. Just somebody inside your company might want to do that. And then there's packet data. I was doing a Wireshark project a couple of classes ago, and students say, what good is Wireshark? And I said, well, it's not as much good as it used to be because almost everything is encrypted now. But certain things aren't encrypted, and DNS is typically not encrypted. So if you want to capture the network traffic, the first thing is how do you get a copy of it? And typically use a span port on a router, or better, you buy a special device called a network tap, because you need to handle all the traffic for your whole network. And actually, this turns out to be a real problem because your networks are not, your home network has one way to the internet, one router. You could catch the traffic there, and that would be probably all the traffic you care about, although if there's traffic internal to your network, like from your laptop to your file server, you won't see that. But in a company, it's very complicated. There are layers of the network. There might be more than one network connection to the internet. It's actually not probably true that you can capture all the data you need at one point. You probably need to capture data at several points to find information that will let you follow attacks. And by the way, you do not want to capture packets for archiving them with Wireshark. Wireshark has a lot of graphics, and it captures the packets into RAM. It will just crash after a while, and it's not very secure because the protocol handlers that analyze all that stuff are written by amateurs and contributed to the community, and some of them are unsafe. So you want to use TCP dump. Is a command line tool, which is much safer. It just copies the packets into a file without interpreting them, and then you use Wireshark to analyze them later. Anyway, and so you need libpcap or winpcap. This is on Linux, or on Windows, I think. I'm not sure, that might be on Windows too, but anyway, you normally store things in pcap or in later versions of Wireshark in pcap NG, I think, the new next generation. That's the standard format for packet captures. And so packet captures are nice for a incident response team because then you can really find out completely what happened. You can see what files were sent over the network and so on, unless they're encrypted, which unfortunately many things are now. But it's a huge file and it grows really fast. You can fill up huge storage spaces with complete packet data from an enterprise, and people are reluctant to do it for that reason. So you often store something smaller and more easy to handle, like network flow data. And flow data came essentially from pen register data. In the old long-distance telephone network, the pen register would record what phone number made a call to what other phone number at what time and for how long. And the purpose of it was to make your phone bill, where they would charge you by the minute for all those calls. And this extended to the internet, where flow data is used to limit how much bandwidth you get. If you paid for only a limited amount of bandwidth, they'll connect you to a network and then record how much you're using. So you record source and destination IP, ports, protocols, and NetFlow is the standard for this, developed by Cisco to just have a summary of what flows of data have gone by. It doesn't record the data, it just records how many bytes were sent from here to there on what protocol, so you have a general idea what's going on, but you don't have enough information to reconstruct images or files that were sent over the network. I see a comment in Twitch. How to sign in on Windows Virtual Machine. Well, we'll talk about that after this. Yeah, there's when you're installing Windows 11, there's some traps there. I'll point that out after the lecture. Anyway, all right. So you TCP sessions. In TCP session, you know when it ends. It starts with a SYN/ACK, and either if it finishes normally, it ends with fin or reset. So under normal conditions, you know when it started and when it ended. UDP is not that way. UDP sends, there's no acknowledgement, there's no handshake, there's no ending packet. You just send data, and it best effort is made to deliver it. So you just have to sort of guess when it ends. When there's no more data coming for a while, it just says, well, I guess that's the end. So you get flow records. It may appear in multiple flow records. So here you have router name, source address, destination address, source port and destination port. I guess it's probably, looks like the source port is 10. 1, 2, I don't know what it is. Somewhere in here. I guess these are the source port and destination port. Yeah. And then number of packets transferred, timestamps. These are timestamps. Those are probably numbers of packet transferred and so on. You know, usual stuff. Minimal kind of data. Much less data than you get storing full packet captures. And all right, another thing you can do is show metadata. The flow records have very little. The packet data tends to be overwhelming. And so application layer metadata would keep some packet fields from the application. In the application itself, it will do logging and then store information like it knows I'm a DNS server, so it's going to store information about what requests have been made and how many responses I sent, things like that. This is often your most valuable data. But they all serve different purposes. All right, so let's try a Kahoot. And this is 4A. All right, so what kind of data uses IP fix standard? I don't remember myself. It must have been in the slides. Network flows, that must be the other name for Cisco's method. Let's get back to that. Yeah, flow data. This is Cisco's NetFlow. That's the only term I've ever heard. Apparently the official term of it is IP fix, but the Cisco term, NetFlow, is what I mostly remember. Okay, fair enough. All right. All right, what kind of data is controlled by named.conf? That's logs, okay, fair enough. Those are logs made by the name daemon. All right. Now, I'm confused myself about the difference between logs and application level metadata. They seem to be the same thing. Let me see if I can understand it. Application data metadata keeps some packet fields from the application, but logs, aren't they the same thing? There's the logging. So I guess, from what I can make out here, the application level metadata picks some of the data from the log, and I wonder what product would do that. I'm a little confused about what would cause this. I think it must be another thing watching it, like an IDS. Anyway, all right. That's an aspect of this I'm not so confident about. All right, what kind of data is captured at a span port? All right, this has a clear answer. Package, which you get there, whole package, all right. All right, what log entry shows that somebody performed a zone transfer and got data from your server? That's X for out. All right, data let out of your server. All right, and what kind of data perfects the privacy of your users by excluding IP addresses? Ah, that explains it more. Okay. That's the application level metadata, and that makes some sense. This is something that's gotten a lot of companies in trouble. They try to collect data about an attack, and then they try to share it with somebody else. And when you try to remove the personal data from your customers from it, it's very hard to do. I think AOL about 20 years ago published a bunch of search data from users thinking that was anonymous, and it turns out if you look at what people search, you can easily figure out everything. They search their home, they search their work, they search their own name. It's not easy to anonymize it, and so that's why, anonymizing something, excluding IP addresses, gives some anonymization, but when you share any significant amount of data about anybody, you usually find that you haven't really protected the privacy of the users very well at all. Anyway. So, to detect stuff, if you want to detect cache poisoning attacks, like the Dan Kaminsky one, then you'll see brute force attempts to guess the transaction ID and the source port, and so you'll see many, many attempts to send data to a server with different transaction IDs and source ports. So the way it works is you make a request for a record that is not cached, then the server will go ask some other server for that information, and then you blast it with many false responses, hoping to get lucky and have it tricked into leaving your false response instead of the real response that is coming from the other server. And so you'd see in flow records, you'd see many things from the same source IP. Here's a request, then many things from the same source IP, and very fast, like every millisecond, and the same number of bytes in each one. This is repeating the same information over and over and over from the same source to the same destination, going from a remote coming in. I'm a little confused why the destination port is 1024. I'd expect it to be the other way. But anyway, that's the sort of thing you'll see. There are many, many requests coming ridiculously fast from the same source. Is probably not anybody actually trying to do legitimate DNS lookups. It's some attempt to flood your server with false data to fool it. So there's no layer 7 data. I can't see the actual request. I can't pinpoint the domains or the addresses being injected. So that's pretty limited, that layer 7 data. Now, if I want, however, requests are irrelevant, poisoning is performed by replies. It would be nice if I had the domain name, information about the sections. If I had the transaction ID, I could see the transaction IDs being different on each one, that sort of thing, and only including replies that claim to be authoritative. That would be good stuff to get better information about that kind of attack. Now, another kind of attack you'll see is transient domains. This is what happens with most of the malicious domains that you click on. They put those malicious domains typically on hacked servers, and and even if it's not a hacked server, they keep on getting taken down because they're caught being malicious, so they have to keep moving it around. So they often have a domain name, and they keep changing the IP address that domain name points to get around people that keep taking down the malicious servers. Those are botnet controllers, malware downloads, or places where people drop stolen files or so on. So if you see transient domains, that is suspicious. If you want to identify them, look for traffic with small TTLs. Now let me try again this one we did before. If I go to terminal and I do a dig of msn.com, you notice I get an answer and I get a time here. And if I do the same dig again, the time is 2082, now the time is 2074. That's the cache time. So this is how long it's going to hold this record in a cache. When it hits 0, it will delete this record and refresh it, and the next time request that comes in, it'll get a fresh copy. So transient domains will just have a very small number here, like 60, where they refresh it every second, every 60 seconds. So that's a thing to know. So you might want to see that that's the TTL. So if you see traffic with small TTLs, that might indicate that it has always got a small TTL and it refreshes frequently, and that is not something a normal website does. It's something a malicious website's more likely to do. Then there's round-robin DNS. Now this is another one, which I think I was able to see when I did Microsoft.com. Let's try that. Yeah, I get a whole bunch of IP addresses. Notice the first one is 162, and they're all the same time, 3600. When I do it again, now I have 3592, and it's still 162 on top, and 133 at the bottom, but sometimes it changes the order. This one, yeah, now it's put 133 at the top, see? So this is a really simple way of load balancing your servers. You have a lot of traffic, and what you do is you get different IP addresses for each server, but you tie them all to the same domain name, and you answer in sort of a random order. And this means that all your customers will be randomly sent to different servers. It's a simple form of load balancing and high availability, and you can see that's what Microsoft is using. All right. Yep, there's an example of it from before. All right, and then there's fast fluxing domain. The TTL is only a few seconds, so the IP is constantly being refreshed from the authoritative source, and this is a way to maintain control of a botnet even when people block malicious traffic. When they take down your server, you put it up on another server, change the address, and your botnet continues to be able to phone home. So Configure had this. You do a request, it would only be 60 seconds, and then 28 seconds later it would be round robining. These three are just rotating, and then it goes down to 4 seconds, and then it refreshes with completely different things 1 minute later. 83 seconds, it's a completely different set. So it really has a lot of different servers, and they're being used and rotating. All right, and then there's fast flux domains. Here, this reforma.info is a request, here it is at 10, then it's at 20, then it's at 30, then it's at 40, at all different places. So that shows that it keeps on giving you different answers each time you ask. And then there's phantom domains. This used to be, by the way, what bad guys would do. It used to be the domain registrars would give you a free trial of a few days. And of course, the bad guys would just use the free trial, never pay anything, and just keep getting more and more free trials, so everyone stopped doing that. But anyway, you can have domains that are only used for a brief period of time. This is very common. And then you'll have some kind of semi-random process that keeps generating new domains every day. All right. So you can do, one thing you might do is look for a domain that has only become active recently, and this is why sites that archive DNS historical data are extremely useful. There's a bunch of them, and some of them have free data, and some of them charge money for the service. But the first question you might ask whenever you get an email or a request to an unfamiliar site is, how old is this site? If the site was just registered a few days ago, it's probably malicious. If it was a legitimate company, it would have been around for a while, most likely. And that's a common issue. And so WannaCry ransomware is the one I mentioned before, this, where it shot down hospitals in Europe. This caused, and it used NSA attacks. This is a problem, a real black eye for the NSA. They developed attacks, they did not tell the manufacturer so it could be patched, and then they let the Russians, then they leaked it to the Russians. Russians used it to make malware, so it's pretty nasty. Now, apparently they knew Russians had stolen it because they secretly told Microsoft, and Microsoft did release a patch a few months before without explaining where they found out about the vulnerability, but the hospitals didn't install it in time. So it's a problem, and this is the one that was accidentally stopped by malware check. Because he bought a domain, and simply buying that domain happened to turn off the malware. And here's Configure. This is a famous one, infected Windows machines several years ago, and it just would it generated an endless chain of these pseudo-random domain names. And so the registrars trying to stop it tried to predict them all and block them all to gain control of the botnet. All right, another thing that keeps coming back is the DNS changer, where you infect a machine and you change its DNS resolvers. On Windows machines, it's in the settings of your network card. You can change your DNS resolvers to go to a malicious one, which will give you mostly the right answer, but some things it'll redirect elsewhere, like the local bank will redirect to a fake bank site. This is a pretty powerful attack. And one thing, when this first came out, the first DNS changer, the FBI arrested the people involved and owned the server, but then they said they had to make several applications to the government to get money, because they said we want to keep the server up, because if we take down the server, all the people that are infected will lose DNS, they'll lose internet connection. We want to keep running the server to provide internet connection while we send out public service messages and try to get people to change their DNS settings. And yet that's a strange activity, and they didn't really have funding for it, so it was kind of a battle, as for a few years they kept that server up anyway. So recursive DNS requests going to suspicious remote addresses is one clue. Going to an IP address that's known to be malicious or has one of these suspicious properties. These are clues that you're using a strange DNS resolver and not a logical one. You logically should be using either your ISP's DNS resolver or your company's DNS resolver, or one of the famous public ones like Google or OpenDNS. If you're using some weird thing, it's a clue that somebody has maliciously changed your DNS. And then there's tunneling. When you take over machines on a network, they have to phone home. They have to tell the control center, I'm now owned, you can issue commands to me. So they have to sneak that traffic out of your network. Now, everybody has firewalls, so you can't just send it on a random port. In the old days, they would use IRC chat, but everybody got wise to that, and they just blocked IRC chat port numbers. So you try to send traffic that looks like something else. It either looks like HTTP or HTTPS or DNS or some other common traffic. So you can do it by port 53. This is a covert channel, a way to send data where it is not easy to tell that data is being sent. But in fact, it's actually not that hard to find, because the DNS requests will be unusually large. What you do typically, a real domain name is like www.yahoo.com. That's a real domain name. The name is pretty short and simple, but when you're exfiltrating information from your network, you do things like dig, whole blob of base64.evil.com. That's what you do. That's how you do it. And so this is just a DNS request as far as your firewall is concerned. It goes out, and in here is base 64 encoded data, or actually, to be fair, base 32 encoded data. I have some projects about this. DNS actually uses base 32 instead of base 64. But anyway, so the main thing about it is the domain names are much longer than legitimate domains, and they're much more random. So if you measure the size of the request or the entropy of the request, you can identify the suspicious requests that are in fact tunneling traffic out of your network, not doing legitimate requests. These are the legitimate requests with short names. These are the botnet requests with large names. And then there's DOS attacks. You can flood the server with a variety of traffic and just fill it up with requests so it no longer provides service. And if you want to detect that, you can just look for unusual measures of traffic, too many requests coming in on various measures of traffic. Excessive traffic indicates you're under attack. And if you want to take down a company, and at least a few years ago they did study and found out that many of the DOS attacks are commercial DOS attacks. People pay for someone to DOS their competitor. Like you're selling shoes, so you DOS the other shoe site so people can't get there to bring traffic to your site. And so taking down their DNS server would be a perfectly effective way to do that. It might be the most vulnerable server they have. It might be more effective than taking down their web server directly. Anyway, let's try another Kahoot. All right. All right, so what packets perform DNS poisoning? Replies. You send a request that the server, you ask the server for a domain name it doesn't know, it sends a request to some other server to find that information, and now before the other real server responds, you flood it with replies. The replies are what perform the poisoning. All right, so if I dig this, I get 4 IPs in a different order each time. So what's happening here? That's normal behavior. That's round-robin DNS. Microsoft does it. It's not a suspicious or malicious activity. It's just a way of balancing traffic across multiple servers. All right, you always see low TTL values. What does that indicate? Fast flux. The normal company would not do this because You don't update your IP addresses that often, and it puts a lot of burden on your DNS server. Now, everybody has to keep going back to your authoritative DNS server every 60 seconds from every caching server. So if you have a lot of customers going to your website, it's going to flood your server with too many requests. That's why you'd rather have a longer time, like 3600 or longer. But if you're malicious, then you can change it very often, and that's why you put this low number there. That's a fast flux domain. All right, so what process creates a covert channel? That's tunneling, which is moving one kind of data in a different kind of packet. All right, and what did Marcus Hutchins do to stop WannaCry? You could call it sinkholing. By registering that domain, he captured some traffic, which, and the fact that that traffic was received caused the berm to shut down. All right. Which was one twice, orange one twice. Let me stop the recording.